I think we're live. Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Petra. I'm talking to you today from the Center for Aquatic Sciences. We are based in Camden, New Jersey. We partner with Adventure Aquarium, but we are an educational nonprofit. And so we go out and we do educational programs all around Camden and all around Philadelphia. And so we're reporting into you live today for the Delaware River Festival. And we have some really nice animals for you to meet today. You can already see, you can see one and two of them behind me. So we're going to talk to our little turtle friends later. But the theme of our talk today is all about how water pollution can actually also affect a lot of the animals that we find living on land with us. So before we dive in, that's kind of my little spiel. Just really quick, before we go into our topic, I also want to remind everyone that tomorrow at 4:30, the center will be hosting another virtual program. Some of the teams that we work with are going to be talking about water testing and water quality. So that will be another center program tomorrow at 4:30. It'll be on Facebook, it'll be on YouTube, and it'll also be accessible through the main website. So if you enjoyed today's program, if you enjoy meeting our animals today and hanging out with us, then please feel free to also tune in to our program tomorrow. So on with the show. Like I said, today we are going to meet a couple of animals that live on land, but specifically we're going to talk a little bit about how water pollution can affect animals on land. Because a lot of the times when we talk about water pollution, we do talk about how it affects ocean animals, fish and crabs, and all the little marine invertebrates that live there. And we often talk about how pollution can run off the land into the water. But we're going to kind of talk about that process a little bit in reverse today. So I do have a presentation ready just to give us a little bit of background information. So give me a moment while I share my screen here. Here we go. So we're talking today how ocean pollution affects life on land. So it affects us, it affects plants, it affects animals. So first of all, when we're talking about pollution, where exactly does it come from? Because if we're talking about a problem, it's good to know the source of the problem, right? So there's kind of two different ways I tend to categorize pollution. One, we can talk about, big companies and industry. So that can look like anything from chemicals to old electronics and machines, fumes and gases, but then also think of places like Amazon and Google, these big companies that we use, shipping materials, boxes, bubble wrap, plastic bags from grocery stores, right? Stuff that's really, really big scale stuff. But there's also kind of smaller scale stuff, right? There's stuff that we produce in our own houses that can also be harmful to the environment. So some of these single-use plastics that we have, plastic bags and straws and containers, stuff like that. Our own cleaning supplies, so think about maybe the bottles of shampoo or conditioner, laundry detergent, bleach, Clorox, things like that we use to clean up our houses. Old electronics, surprisingly enough, end up in the ocean. So old iPhones, computers, laptops, and believe it or not, clothes. Our clothes also kind of take up space when we throw them out. They can also take up space and be harmful, if they end up in the wrong habitat. So just a little bit of background information of when we're talking about pollution, what exactly are we talking about? We're talking about all these different things, all these different waste products, from the things that humans do, how we run our companies and how we run our houses. We produce a lot of waste. And unfortunately, a lot of that waste ends up in habitats where it's not supposed to. So how exactly does it get there? When we're talking about pollution that ends up in aquatic habitats, a big thing that you will hear people talk about is runoff. So let's say you have a farm or a big warehouse or something like that, and the farm uses fertilizer for their crops, and the big factory or the big warehouse has all kinds of chemicals and stuff that kind of maybe build up in the parking lot around the factory. Whenever it rains, that water, water, because of gravity, water likes to go down, right? And so as it rains, it will sometimes pick up these things, these fertilizers, stuff like that, and it'll bring it all into our rivers, into our streams, and it also sometimes even goes through the ground into underwater, these big underground reservoirs and stuff, these big kind of lakes that exist underground. So there is a lot of different ways that pollution can get into the water. We talk about runoff a lot, but actually, once the pollution is in the water, something that doesn't always, occur to us to think about is that pollution can get out of the water and back into the soil, right? Because soil absorbs water, right? And that's why trees and roots grow alongside rivers and streams. They pull water up from the ground, and a lot of that water is coming from the river. So it's not all going, just in one direction, from factories and from farms into rivers and then out in the ocean. A lot of that water also gets absorbed back into the land. And so trees and bushes and grasses, they will absorb some of that water. And if it has toxic chemicals or any pollution in it, then it gets back onto the land. So how exactly does this then end up affecting our wildlife? So first, one of the most obvious things that we can see is physical pollution, right? Trash building up on riverbeds, and that can be dangerous for animals because it can physically take away space from them. So it might, we see these pictures of these birds here where they're trying to build nests, but there's a lot of garbage around them. So it can physically take away space from animals. It can prevent plants from growing in those areas, so it can take away food sources from animals. And also animals, sometimes we see a lot of pictures of animals either getting trapped by plastic and garbage, or animals trying to eat plastic and garbage because, of course, they don't recognize it for what it is, and sometimes they eat it by accident. With some of the harder to see pollution, things like chemicals and fumes, the way that affects our habitats is that if it does get pulled into the soil, if it does get pulled into the earth, it can sometimes be toxic to plants that are growing there. And so this might affect the plant in a couple of different ways. Number one, it could kill the plant, or it cause it to grow incorrectly. Or another thing that it could do, it could just kind of sit in the plant until another animal comes and eats it. And when the animal eats the plant, they're also eating the chemicals that plant pulled up from the ground. So when we're talking about, chemicals moving through a food chain like this, a word that you will hear a lot of the times is bioaccumulation. So bio means life, and to accumulate means to add up. So if there are some chemicals in the water or in the soil, whenever they get pulled up and eaten and get involved in the food chain, these things tend to add up and increase in the food chain as animals eat plants or eat one another. So these are just a couple of different ways that pollution, different types of pollution, can affect animals in different ways. So of course, this is, it's very sad because we don't want to lose our animal friends. We want to help keep them protected. We want to help keep them safe. And luckily enough, there are scientists and there are great people out there that are doing research and trying to change things for the better. So there are a few different things that people are doing. Obviously, there are beach cleanups, and I use beach cleanups as an example just because that is a very obvious example of kind of where the land meets the water. But you can do cleanups anywhere. You can do cleanups in the city. You can do cleanups in your local park. You can do cleanups on your own backyard or on your own front street, or you can go walking through the woods. One example, my family and I actually do this every year for Christmas. we will go walking down down the back road of our street, and we'll do a family cleanup day. And we take my dad's pickup truck, and we all grab a plastic bag, big garbage bags, and we all just walk along the road and see how much garbage we can clean up. And so even though it's only once a year, and even though it's only around the holidays, it still always amazes us how much garbage gets built up back there. And even if we're only doing it for one day, we're still making it a better habitat for that one day. So going around, getting a couple of friends together and just, getting in the habit of carrying a trash bag around with you, that's one way that we can help keep our habitats clean, at least from physical trash, right? At least from plastic pollution and stuff like that. Another way that we can help prevent our habitats from getting polluted are hopefully by stopping, to use plastics and plastic bags and containers and stuff, and not using as many things that might end up in the habitats in the first place. So there's been, a lot of us have seen a bigger push to use reusable straws and reusable shopping bags instead of plastic ones. That's a really great thing to do. A lot of companies that make food are now changing their containers, changing from plastic to different materials that won't sit in habitats for a very, very long time. Instead, it's either recycled cardboard or paper materials, or made out of different plant materials that, if it does get thrown out into a habitat or into a landfill, it'll break down and won't sit there for long periods of time. And so to encourage people to change these things, some grocery stores and some companies have actually banned plastic bags, or will charge extra to use plastic bags. I know in other countries, like in the United Kingdom, so in England and in Wales and Scotland and Ireland, they do actually charge customers to use if they need to use a plastic bag. And so that encourages people to remember to bring their own bags so they don't have to pay extra. And so one last thing that we can all do, and this is maybe a little bit more for the adults who are listening, but we can hold people responsible. So using our power as people to vote, right? To vote to get good people in our government who will put together good policies and good laws to hold companies and people accountable if they are damaging an environment. So those are just a couple of things, kind of where pollution comes from, and a few things that we can do to help. All right, we'll stop sharing my screen. Hello again. Uh-oh, Sarah said, are the slides supposed to be progressing with the talk? I see the PowerPoint window, but no specific slide. Oh no, I'm so sorry about that. I thought they were advancing the whole time. We can always, I'm so sorry about that. I was just watching I was just going through the presentation, and I didn't realize that the slides weren't advancing. I'm sorry about that. Well, hopefully the first slide, well, I guess we missed a couple of the pictures. But I apologize for the technical snafu. As well, yeah. Hopefully nothing I said wasn't overly complicated, and people still kind of got the gist of it. So we have a couple of animals who we are going to meet today. So we'll start with the two little troublemakers behind me. And I think what I'll probably do is I'll just take my camera and we'll just go zoom in, and we'll meet them in their little tents. Oh no, I don't have the movable camera today. Never mind, we're doing things differently. So our first animal today is my friend Pandora. Here she is. And so Pandora is an eastern box turtle. So the other friend who you see behind me, that's Turtellini. He's our other box turtle. I'm going to try to maybe keep Pandora hidden from him a little bit because every time he sees, he has a crush on Pandora. And every time he sees her, he gets a little overly excited, and I don't want to upset him too much. So this is my friend Pandora. She's an eastern box turtle, and box turtles are a great example of a turtle that we can find living in the forests all over the East Coast. Now, a lot of the times when people think about turtles, they think of turtles living in the water and stuff like that. Box turtles are, I kind of think of it on like a scale from like super turtley to super tortoisey. So the main difference being being that turtles usually live in and around the water, and tortoises usually live on land. But there are some exceptions, and one of those exceptions are box turtles. Box turtles, well, we do sometimes find them hanging around ponds and rivers and streams, stuff like that. They are mostly terrestrial. Terrestrial meaning that they live on land. And so whenever we look at a turtle, if you ever find a shelled friend and you want to know whether or not you should put it in the water, there are a few things that you can look for that give us clues about whether or not that is a land turtle or a water turtle. So one of the most important things that I look for is the shape of their feet. Pandora says, "Excuse me, ma'am, why are you touching my foot?" So if we look at Pandora's foot here, we notice that she has some nice sharp claws. Those are great for digging. But for the most part, her feet are pretty solid and pretty stumpy. They're not very flat and wide. When we see turtles that live in and around the water, they usually have webbed feet, meaning they have extra skin between their toes. Other animals with webbed feet include like bullfrogs that live in the water, or also ducks have webbed feet. Most animals that live in the water either have fins or flippers or webbed feet, something like that, to help them swim and to help them move. But our box turtle here has very kind of sturdy, stumpy legs, which tells us that these legs are much better for walking around in the forest than they are for swimming. The other thing that we can notice about Pandora is the shape of her shell. So box turtles, the reason that they have the name box turtle is they have this kind of bonus feature about their shell. So if we kind of tilt her up a little bit, we can see that she has this line going across the bottom of her shell. And so when box turtles get scared, the front part of their shell, she doesn't like it when I push on it too much, but you can kind of see how it flexes and it moves in and out a little bit. And she can actually move that farther, and she can close it all the way up. So box turtles get their name because they can close up their shell just like a box. So they have this extra little bonus feature, but in order to have room to be able to pull in their head and all of their legs, they need a much taller shell because their shell needs to have extra room in case they want to pull in their legs and pull in their feet. So the fact that she has a very tall shell like this tells me that she's not very streamlined. She wouldn't be able to move too quickly through the water. And just as a comparison to show you a little bit of what I'm talking about, we'll put Pandora back for just a quick second. And we'll just kind of compare the shell of a box turtle versus the shell of a sea turtle. So I have, obviously they're different sizes too. So I have these two turtle shells with me. This one is from another box turtle, another eastern box turtle, and this one is from another green sea turtle. I do want to start off before we talk about the shells by saying that we didn't hunt these animals. We didn't collect these shells out of the wild. These were all donated to us. A lot of the donations that we get come from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and they were confiscated from people who hunted these animals when they were not supposed to. So we, unfortunately, it's difficult to stop people from hunting animals, but places like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they do their best to try to stop people from poaching animals illegally, and then they sometimes are nice and lend us these biofacts so that we can teach people how to care for these animals and how to respect them. What are some of the ways that you can spot box turtles in the wild? They look like they blend in very well to their environment. Excellent question, Sarah. Yeah, they do blend in really well. They have this great camouflage shell. This one, the top layer that has keratin. Keratin is what makes up our fingernails and our hair. So the colored part is made of keratin. This is the base of their shell, which is actually the turtle's skeleton. It's made out of bone. But you're right that they are very, very good at blending in and camouflaging in with their backgrounds. So I think, and I kind of take this approach anytime I'm walking around a habitat, anytime you're bird watching or looking for turtles. The best thing that you can do is just kind of become familiar with an area, maybe read up about your local box turtles, see what times of the year they tend to be most active in different states and in different areas. Obviously, wintertime is not a very good time to go out and look for box turtles, but if you're ever walking around in the spring and in the summertime, you're much more likely to see them. So you might start off by visiting local nature centers. I know John Hines is a great nature center to visit that is in the Philly area. And they have a lot of red-eared sliders and a lot of aquatic turtles, but they might occasionally have box turtles there. You can also join different Facebook groups. There are a lot of social media groups that tell you kind of where to find different animals at different times of the year. So you can collaborate with other people, maybe try joining some citizen science groups or join your local Audubon Society chapter. Even though they go bird watching, a lot of the times if you're out bird watching, you'll see other animals as well. So it's just kind of about, going out, exploring different habitats and connecting with people who are also part of maybe, kind of nature societies and might have a little bit of insight about where you can go to find these animals. Great question. So kind of back to aquatic versus terrestrial turtles. So we have our box turtle shell here, so we can see that kind of nice dome shell that we were talking about that gives them plenty of room to be able to hide inside their shell. This is what the inside looks like, so we can actually see their skeleton. We can see their ribs have fused together to create the base of the shell. And then this is the shell of a green sea turtle. So we can see, right, that this is much, it's not nearly as tall, right? It's much smoother, it's much lower. It is very smooth to the touch. There's not a lot of bumps and ridges on here. So this shell is a lot better for swimming and it's a lot more streamlined. So looking at the shape of the shell, looking at the shape of the legs can definitely give us some clues about where that animal likes to live, right? Does it like to live on land? Does it like to live on water? Look at her. She's so cute. Pandora is such a sweet little lady. So we do have another box turtle who I will introduce you to here. So the other little ball of energy who you see back there, where is he? There he is. That's my friend Turtellini. So we said that Pandora is an eastern box turtle. Eastern box turtles, as their name suggests, live on the east coast of the United States. Turtellini is a three-toed box turtle, and three-toed box turtles live a little bit more in the south and in the Midwest. They do cross over a little bit. There are actually examples of three-toed box turtles making hybrids with eastern box turtles, but for the most part, eastern box turtles live on the East Coast, and three-toed box turtles live a little bit more south and in the Midwest. So we'll take a look at him, and we'll notice a couple of the differences. So this is my friend Turtellini. Now we see that he's a box turtle because he still has this nice tall shell, and he still has those nice stumpy legs that are really good for walking and digging. And he has that characteristic kind of line going across the bottom of his shell that helps him open and close his shell in case he gets scared. There are a couple of differences between three-toed box turtles and eastern box turtles. One of the easiest ways to tell them apart is that the three-toed box turtles have 3 toes on their back feet. he has, those are his little back feet there. And he's got 3 toes on his back foot. So that's the easiest way to tell them apart. Eastern box turtles have 4 toes on their back feet. There are a couple of other differences between Eastern versus 3-toed box turtles. 3-toed box turtles, like Turtellini, their shells tend to be a little bit darker and a little bit more kind of just brown. You might notice with Pandora, she's got those really pretty kind of speckly patterns on her shell, and we can even see it a little bit on this old shell. They have these kind of orange and black patterns that are perfect for Halloween. But 3-toed box turtles, his has a little bit of patterns, but it's more just kind of uniform and brown. He has some nice speckling here, some white on his little chinny chin. And another big difference is actually their eyes. So with Eastern box turtles, females will have just kind of solid brown eyes, and the males will have this nice orange ring going around the outside of their eyes. And 3-toed box turtles don't necessarily have that. So he's showing us how he walks. So part of the reason he's so excited. So Turtellini and Pandora live in separate habitats because he's a male and she's a female, and we don't necessarily want them to get together and reproduce. So because because he's awake, he sees a female. That's why he's kind of twitchy and and getting all excited today. I did put a clipboard in between their tanks to try and stop him from seeing her so he wouldn't get too excited, but he caught a glimpse of her. So now he's in love, and he says, let me go over and profess my love to her. So that's our friend Turtellini. All right. If anybody does have any questions about other turtle stuff or how we take care of these animals or anything like that, you're welcome to ask me any questions that pop into your head. So we'll put Turtellini back. We do have another animal to meet today, and I also brought some. Actually, maybe we'll do that first. I brought some mealworms with me. So Pandora gets they both get a little bit of protein in their diet. I added some salad into Pandora's tank in case she wanted to eat. She doesn't live in this tank, by the way. She has another tank that she lives in, which is much bigger and has a little house in it for her and everything. So she lives in a bigger tank next door. But we feed them salad a couple of times a week, and then they also have protein days. So one of the sources of protein for them are insects. Box turtles hunt insects in their habitat. They can eat earthworms, mealworms, different ants, different beetles, different spiders. If they're quick enough to catch it, then they'll usually eat a pretty wide variety of insects. So Turtellini really, really happens to love mealworms. So I'm going to move the computer a little bit closer, see if I can move it closer to the tank, and we'll try to do a little bit of feeding with Turtellini and give him some extra snacks. So we'll put him back in his tank there. We'll move a few things out of the way. We'll move you all closer. All right. Get as close as possible. And then we have our mealworms. So here's, whoops, where is it? There it is. Here's the worm. Eep. Maybe you can see it. It's worming around. We're going to see if Turtellini wants to have a snack. It's one of his favorite things to eat. He's a very picky eater. He always pushes his salad greens to either side, and he will pick out the fruits and he'll pick out the worms. Oops, he dropped it. One reason I also like to feed Turtellini a lot of the times on programs is because it kind of shows people that, you know, a lot of the times people think turtles are very slow moving animals, but Turtellini is pretty quick. He can hustle. He can hustle when he wants to, and he will snap at those bugs. He will snap at those bugs. I might have missed this earlier. What would they eat in their typical habitat? Box turtles are omnivores, meaning that they eat both plants and meat. For them, some of the plants that they might eat might just include like the leaves of different plants and grasses and stuff like that. There are some plants that are toxic to box turtles. So, for example, I know that like specifically tomato vines are toxic for them. Rhubarb is also toxic for them. But for the most part, I mean, we feed him lettuce, a lot of different leafy greens. So lettuce, kale, Swiss chard, collard greens, stuff like that. So any of these like kind of leafy plants, or the grasses and stuff that grow in the forests and fields around the East Coast, all of those are part of his diet. And then protein for him, some of the animals that he hunts would normally be insects. They might also include, they will sometimes eat rodents, eat small rodents. So little teeny tiny like mice or chipmunks, stuff like that, usually when they're still small enough for the turtle to catch them. But most of their protein is made up of insects. So that's what we're feeding him today. You want to come get this one? Come get it over here. It's over here. One thing that I also like about Turtellini, that he does what I call turtle parkour. So this is the habitat that he lives in. He has his little archway over here, and then every now and then we'll also throw in kind of like sticks and rocks and things for him to interact with and just kind of sniff and hang out with. And he loves to climb things. He's the weirdest turtle I've ever met. He will climb on top of his little archway here, and then just sit up there and look at us, and you know, pretend that he's King Turtellini. He likes to look over his little kingdom. So we'll feed a couple more mealworms to Turtellini, and then we'll meet our last animal friend. Come over here. Part of the other reason that we're able to feed Turtellini like this, and I'm not doing this as much with Pandora, is actually that Pandora, she doesn't have a lot of vision in mostly her right eye, but also a little bit in her left eye. You might have also noticed on the video that she kind of has a bum leg. So Pandora came from a wildlife rehab center. She was a rescue after being hit by a car. What, you can't get it? Come over here. There you go. So Pandora was a rescue after she was hit by a car, so she has damage to one of her front legs, and she also has a little bit of damage to her eyes. So when we're feeding her, she knows her routine well enough that like when we put down her food bowl, she's usually pretty good about going right over and eating, you know, whatever it is we've given her, whether it's salad or whether it's a protein day. But because she doesn't see as well, it's kind of hard for us to tongue feed her like this, and for her to actually see the worm wiggling around and go and eat it. So that's why Turtellini is getting snacks. It's not because we're playing favorites. It's because we've tried this with Pandora a couple of times, and she literally just doesn't care about the worms. Oops, missed a spot. All right. I think that's enough. That's enough worms for Turtellini. He's had like 5 or 6 at this point. So that's a good snack day for him. So we'll just kind of keep him in the background here. I'll move you all back a little bit again. And if anyone is just jumping into our live stream here, hi, I'm Petra. I'm from the Center for Aquatic Sciences. We're in Camden, New Jersey, and we are learning about some land animals today. So during the presentation, in case anyone kind of jumped in late, one of the things that we mentioned was how pollution from the water can come in on land and affect some of the animals that live on land. And one thing that we mentioned briefly was bioaccumulation. So kind of these pollutants and toxins kind of adding up and moving their way through the food chain. So just to recap that really quick, in case anyone missed it, let's say that there is, a toxic chemical or something in the water, and as plants are pulling water up through their roots, they also pull that chemical up into the plant. And what happens then, because it's part of the food chain, maybe an animal that eats plants will come over and take a bite of that plant, and now that chemical is inside the animal. And then another animal comes over and eats that animal, and now the chemical moves, first it was in the plant, and now it's also in this animal, and now it's also in the other animal. And so that's sometimes how pollution moves through the food chain. And so an example that we can use is actually box turtles. They're both herbivores and they are omnivores, so they eat both plants and protein. So if there's a plant that has pulled up any pollution from the river, and let's say some worms or some bugs were nibbling on the leaves of those plants, they will then get that toxin into their bodies. And then when the box turtle comes over and either eats the plant or eats the bug, they will also ingest that toxin into their body. So that's, kind of an example of a food chain that exists that might cause pollution to move out of aquatic habitats into land habitats and affect the animals that live there. So we do have another animal to see today. Our next animal is my friend Jiffy, and Jiffy is very, very pretty, and she's a corn snake. Bear with me just a moment. Hey, buddy. Here she is. So this is my friend Jiffy. Here she is. And Jiffy is a corn snake. So corn snakes get their name from this nice little corn kernel pattern on their bellies. Oh, she's very curious today. She says, that computer's warm. I want to go over there. So if you got to look at Jiffy's belly, she's very squiggly today. You can see on her belly, she has this little corn kernel pattern. Hers is black and white, but corn snakes come in all different colors. They can be orange or red, like Jiffy. They can be yellow. They can be white. They can be black. They can be silver. They can come in all different kinds of colors. So they have this little corn kernel pattern on their belly, so that's why we call them corn snakes. They do also sometimes live on corn farms or in corn fields. They're a farmer's best friend. So they live in those areas because a lot of the times there are good mice and rats for them to eat there. Which, if you think about it, is that it's great for the farmer. Farmers don't want mice or rats living on their farm. They eat the crops that the farmer is trying to grow. So having a corn snake on your farm is a great form of natural pest control. Unfortunately, pollution does still affect corn snakes. They do, apart from living on farms or on fields, they do also live in forested areas. So again, we were kind of talking about, pollution getting out of the stream and into the food chain. That affects snakes as much as any other predator. There is another thing that people do that can also be kind of harmful to snakes and other predators, which is putting out poison traps to try and get rid of mice and rats. A lot of the times people don't think about it because they think, well, we poison the animal, then we get rid of it. But if we set out poison traps for mice and rats, it sometimes takes a while before the poison affects that animal. And there's always the chance that a snake or a lizard or another bird can come by and eat that mouse or rat, and then they ingest the poison as well. So while it's not specific to aquatic habitats, it's still something that humans do that can be harmful and dangerous to our animals. And we do want to, even though a lot of people think snakes are scary, they are still very valuable in their habitats, and they're valuable to people, because if you have a snake living in your backyard, chances are you won't really have any mice or rats in your house because, little Jiffy will go and hunt them down. So we do want to be, careful that we're not, putting in anything into our backyards or our gardens or our soil that might affect the predators in our backyard who are just out there trying to make a living. But this is our girl Jiffy. She's very pretty. And she's very curious. But we can get a nice good look at her face right now, right? So a couple things about, just kind of general snake information. When Jiffy is sticking out her tongue like that, a lot of us know that snakes use their tongues to smell. They do have nostrils, but they mostly breathe with their nostrils because it's such a cute face. She does have such a cute face. So, they have nostrils. Some people make the mistake of thinking that because snakes smell with their tongue that they don't have a nose. They have a nose. They have nostrils. They just don't use it to smell like we do. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because the way snakes eat, they kind of open up their whole head. We've heard of snakes unhinging their jaw. And so if you've ever seen a snake eat, it kind of looks, think about like pulling a sock over your foot, how it starts off small, but then the whole thing kind of stretches out to fit it over your foot. That's a little bit of what snakes do when they're eating their foot. They kind of open up their whole head, kind of like you would stretch out a sock to put it over your foot. And so when they're eating, when they have their mouth full, it wouldn't be, they're not able to breathe with their mouths when their mouth is full. So instead they breathe through their nose. So their nose is mostly just for breathing, and then their tongue, they literally taste the air with their tongue, and that gives them all the information they need about what's around them. How big can these snakes get? Anywhere from 3 to 5 feet. Usually 5 feet would be pretty big for a corn snake. Jiffy is about like 3.5 to 4 feet long. And that's about the size that I've seen. Most of the corn snakes that I've worked with have been anywhere between 3 and 4 feet long. Sometimes a little bit more. But yeah, that's about their average length. So even though they're skinny, they can get pretty long. And it takes them a few years before they're finished growing. It can take them maybe 2 or 3 years before they get to their full size. But yeah, they can grow to be surprisingly long and surprisingly big. The other thing is that if they don't reach their, if they don't grow to be 3 or 4 feet long, some things that can limit their growth are things like room to move around, or even food supply. If they're living in a habitat where maybe they don't have access to as many mice or as many rats, that can sometimes limit how big they get, or it might stall their growth, right? So if when they're super duper little, they have a hard time finding food, or it takes them a while to find a habitat that has food, it might stunt their growth a little bit for the first couple of years. And then if they find themselves in a habitat that has a surplus of food, they might get bigger as they get older. Another thing that I have here that I want to show you, we do just have a minute or two left, but another really cool thing that I always like to show when I have Jiffy is her shed. So many of us know that snakes shed their skin. If you've never seen a snake shed, this is what it looks like. So snakes shed their skin regularly. A lot of the times we hear that snakes shed their skin as they grow, which is true, but they do it as adults too. And the reason that they do it is because over time, their scales can get kind of like wear and tear. They might get like bumps or bruises or scratches. And so part of the healing process, the same way our body grows scabs to cover wounds, and then covers it up with new skin, part of their healing process is to heal their wounds and then shed off the old layer, which might have scars or scratches on it, and have a new layer of skin underneath. So this is what her shed looks like. And then on the front, it's falling apart just a little bit. It is very delicate. But this is where her face is. This is the shed from her face. And you can actually see where her eyes were, because snakes don't have eyelids. Instead, they have little caps over their eyes, and they shed those caps. So if you ever see a snake I went out into the woods recently and I saw a snake that was shedding. And the reason that I could tell that it was shedding was because it was curled up, it was all gray, and it had like white or gray eyes. Sometimes people will see a snake like that and they might think that it's dead or that it's sick or that something is going on. If you ever see a snake that looks kind of pale, and especially if it has like gray or blue eyes, that snake is just shedding. But we should be careful about approaching those animals because when they're shedding, they can't see us as well. So we just want to be careful if we're interacting with them. But this is our friend Jiffy, and she's our corn snake. And she appreciates everyone for coming out today. So I think we are just about all out of time. But everyone, thank you. Thank you so much for coming to our little virtual session here. Thank you everybody who asked questions. Pandora, Turtellini, Jiffy, and I really appreciate it. And I hope, again, so my name is Petra. I'm from the Center for Aquatic Sciences, and I hope to see a few of you again tomorrow at 4:30. Some of the teens who work with the center will be doing another virtual program all about water quality. So thank you everyone so much for joining in, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.